Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Went a little over with Scott Ritter, was just on Scott Ritter's channel. He's broadcasting from Russia with Tyler plugging the show we're going to do tomorrow night. It was a lot of fun. Now here I am. Sorry about the 2-minute delay, but I'm really glad to be here, and we're going to have a great stream tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action. Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. So just real quick, just so everybody knows, the reason I was a little bit late is I was just on Scott Ritter's channel, U.S. tour, and that's where Lori Spencer, good friend of our community, and Tyler McConnell, another good friend of our community, they just started a podcast on Scott Ritter's channel. It's called Strange Bedfellows, and I'm going to be on it tomorrow night. I am going to be on it as a special guest tomorrow night. So I hopped on Scott Ritter's stream just now, and we plugged it. Tyler was there. It's the second episode that they are doing tomorrow night. It's not Scott Ritter's channel. It's called like U.S. Tour of Duty is the name of the channel. I'll send a link to our episode tomorrow night, but it'll be at 8 p.m. tomorrow night. I'm doing an episode. It'll be called Ask the Communist. I'll be answering a lot of questions on the Scott Ritter channel with Tyler and with Lori Spencer. It's going to be pretty awesome. So I was just on there plugging it. That's why I was slightly late tonight. I hate being late for anything. I'm one of those on time kind of people. Whenever I'm late, I'm always thinking about, someone's waiting for me or whatever. But there you go. So welcome, everybody. For those of you who may not be familiar with how we do things here, I give my opening remarks, and my opening remarks are then followed by a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. Last night was awesome. You guys hit me with question after question after question. And we had such a wide-ranging discussion in the second half of the program. It was awesome. So let's do it again tonight. If you got something you want me to talk about, or if you just want to send me a nice gift like Mark did, but seriously though, send me some questions. Let's do it again tonight. Let's have another great question and answer section. Tyler going on with them tomorrow night. Like I just said, just drop the link in the chat. It's going to be called Ask the Communist, 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. Be there. It's going to be awesome on the U.S. Tour of Duty podcast YouTube channel. That's Scott Ritter's YouTube channel with Jeff Norman and others. It's going to be awesome. So with Lori Spencer, and it's going to be great. So please tune in. That'll be tomorrow night. But yeah, the way it works here, opening remarks, roll call. We find out who it is, who's watching, who's on the other side of the camera. And then after that, we then do the super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, by all means, shoot me a super chat. And And there you go. There you go. There you go. So I guess with no further ado, I will jump into my opening remarks for tonight. Something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, shoot me a super chat. I'll be writing them down throughout the first half of the program. So there we go. There we go. Folks, we're getting ready for another workshop that we're going to do. This one's going to be in Missouri, June 23rd to the 25th. We're having a weekend workshop, Center for Political Innovation, weekend workshop in Missouri. And I have been writing the outlines for the model classes on Marxism that we've been giving. And I've been going over the outlines. You know, it's the Saxton lectures, those lectures I gave a couple years ago that are just kind of to give you an introduction to what it's all about, to our kind of unique interpretation. It's not unique around the world, but it's unique in America. So-called Marxists in America don't talk the way we talk. We're doing that. And I was working on the outline. And there was a particular point that must be made whenever you're talking about Marxism in the United States. It's a point that really just has to be made. Has to be made. And I've got my first super chat and I'm writing it down. You know, I'm writing it down. And the point that must be made is this. The writings of Karl Marx do not make sense if you read them and are not engaged in struggle. If you don't have the proper context, if you are not living a revolutionary life, if you're not involved in trying to stop the wars, if you're not involved in trying to build a working class movement, you're not involved in trying to resist the low-wage police state, and you open Karl Marx's writings, it is not going to speak to you. And I'm telling you this because this is an experience that many people have. At many colleges and universities, they'll have a class on Marxism. It's usually taught in the philosophy department. Sometimes it'll be taught in the political science department. There'll be a class, Marxism and Society, Marxism, sometimes in the history department. And many younger people that are interested in communism or socialism will take this class, and it'll be taught by a professor. And the class will be boring as hell. And the Marxism that they hear will sound like gibberish. It'll sound like bizarre philosophical gibberish. And they'll go, I guess communism's not for me. Now, some people might think this is a conspiracy. I don't think this is a conspiracy. This isn't a big conspiracy. It's not like the capitalists are sitting there and saying, all right, we shall teach a class on Marxism at the universities and make it boring. That's not what's going on. No, this is a natural thing. Because Marxism and the writings of Karl Marx and the writings of Lenin and the writings of Stalin and Mao and Ho Chi Minh and Verhoeven, these writings do not make sense. If you do not read them in the context of struggle. Folks, Karl Marx was not just a writer, just an academic, just an intellectual. He wasn't that. But if you read about him and if you watch the movies that they've made about his life recently, you would get that impression. You would get the impression that Karl Marx was this old man with a huge beard who sat around writing philosophical manuscripts, having other arguments with people who wrote obscure philosophical manuscripts. You would get the impression that Karl Marx was just a guy who wrote a lot of books that inspired a lot of people. That's what you would think. And that's just not who Karl Marx was as a person. The Communist Manifesto was written in the year of 1848. And in the year of 1848, there were uprisings, revolts in every single European country. I have tried to find the precise number, but there are some people who have calculated that there were over 200 different armed uprisings in Europe in the year of 1848. 1848 was the spring of nations. It was a year when the French and the Germans and the Italians and the Belgians and the British and the Irish and every corner of Europe, the Austrians, people decided to rebel. It was an explosion of popular anger at the way things were. And it was a result of, in many places, disappointment with the French Revolution. Disappointment. The French Revolution had been this huge, tremendous revolt that had toppled the king. But as things got back to normal, after the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte, people looked at it and they said, yeah, we don't have feudalism anymore. But in a lot of places, things are still very, very unjust. There's still huge amounts of poverty. People are suffering. And in much of Europe, they still had feudalism. And all across Europe, people revolted in the year of 1848. Rebellions and uprisings, they happened in London, they happened in Ireland, they happened in Italy, they happened in Austria, they happened in Hungary, they happened in everywhere. There were just uprisings all through Europe in 1848. And one of the places that there was an uprising was the place that we now call Germany. Now, it was not called Germany back then. At that point, there was no German nation state. There were a number of different principalities and regions ruled by princes and kings and dukes and earls and counts. And it was the peasants of Germany, the poor people from the countryside, who said, we are tired of this shit. We're tired of being treated as semi-slaves. We're tired of not having freedom of religion and freedom of speech. We're tired of basically being the property of a landowner. And they revolted. And in the cities, people rose up and revolted. And all across what we now call Germany, there was an uprising demanding the creation of a German nation state. Peasants rose up. Urban workers rose up. Religious fanatics rose up. Catholics rose up. Protestants rose up. It was just a huge explosion in what was now called Germany. And you know what the anthem of the 1848 revolution was? They marched into battle, armies of peasants with their muskets and their bayonets and their spears, marched into battle to overthrow the landlords and overthrow the princes. And you know what they sang as they marched into battle? They sang, Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles, Deutschland über all das Welt. And what was that? That's the German national anthem. And they were demanding the creation of a German nation state that would be a democratic republic. They wanted to overthrow feudalism, and they wanted to unify the territories of Germany into one nation, one country, based on their common culture and heritage, in which they would have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. It was an uprising that swept Germany. Richard Wagner was part of it, the musician. He had to go into exile afterwards. And you know who else was part of it? When I was a kid in Ohio, there was a group of people who did not speak English. They spoke the language Pennsylvania Deutsch. They were called the Amish. All through Pennsylvania and Ohio, you have a group of people who don't use electricity. You know who those people are? Those are religious fanatics, Anabaptists that were part of the German Revolution of 1848. They didn't believe in baptizing babies. They were fanatical religious Protestants. They didn't accept the Catholic Church, and they also didn't like the mainstream Lutheran Protestant church. They wanted people not to get baptized until they were 14. And so they rose up demanding religious freedom. And there were whole Anabaptist armies and militias and such. And they revolted in 1848. The Anabaptists revolted. The peasants revolted. It was a huge society-wide explosion. And what was Karl Marx doing in 1848? Was he just sitting up in his ivory tower writing papers about it? No. Karl Marx was the editor of a newspaper that stirred people up, a radical newspaper that was popular among urban factory workers. And it was a newspaper that championed the revolution and championed the uprising against feudalism. And Karl Marx was the main, I don't know what you want to call him, the main propagandist, the main agitator of one particular wing of the 1848 German Revolution. And his writings stirred people up and inspired them, so much so that when the German Revolution failed, Karl Marx had to get the hell out of there. He was arrested, he was put on trial, threatened with imprisonment, and he and his wife had to flee the country. Does that sound like an armchair revolutionary? Does that sound like a guy who just sat up in his ivory tower writing obscure philosophical screeds? Of course not. Karl Marx was Julian Assange, the journalist exposing the crimes of the rich. One of the main things that Karl Marx wrote about, many people don't know about this, was that he was this newspaper editor. And at the time, all the poor people, when it was wintertime, they would go out to the woods and chop wood for firewood, gather wood from the forests. And then some capitalists decided, no, I'm going to privatize public lands. I'm going to say, you know what? These woods are now private property. And if you go and gather firewood from the forest, you're stealing my private property. And suddenly, all the poor people, all the peasants in the rural areas had to spend their money to buy firewood. They used to get it for free from the common forests in the area. But when they privatized the forests, and the peasants all of a sudden we're having to pick between firewood and food. Karl Marx was the editor of a newspaper, and he wrote articles saying this was unfair, this was unjust. That's what he wrote. And when he wrote that, people accused him of being a communist. And Karl Marx had never heard the term of a communist before. He didn't know what a communist was. But he was just agitating in his newspaper about how unfair it was to make the peasants pay for access to the forest, for firewood. He was advocating for public ownership of natural resources. And he got accused of being a communist. And he didn't know what it was. Then in 1848, Karl Marx and his friends who'd been involved in forming labor unions, factory workers who went on strike, they formed their own faction in the 1848 revolution, and they were called the Communist League. They called themselves communists. And after Karl Marx hightailed it out, got the hell out of Germany after the 1848 revolution failed, he decided he had to write a document to explain what his group of friends, what his buddies, what his comrades, the people who, fought and died on the streets of what we now call Germany, demanding the creation of a German nation state, fighting alongside the peasants and the Anabaptists and the Catholics and the Protestants and all the people demanding the creation of a modern nation state. He had to write a document to explain what this organization that he was the leader of believed. What were the beliefs of this group that had put out this newspaper, that had agitated for the rights of peasants and the rights of poor people and the rights of workers in the factories? What did they believe? And so after fleeing Germany in 1848, Karl Marx composed the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto was a document that was born in struggle. It was born in a movement of people rising up, fighting for their rights, demanding the right to elect their government, demanding a German nation state, demanding protections for the workers on the job, demanding the right of peasants to heat their homes in the wintertime. And when you read the Communist Manifesto, the opening lines of it are full of passion and energy. A specter is haunting Europe. The specter of communism. What is a specter? A specter is a ghost. Fun fact, the first translation, this is actually true. I have looked this up. I thought maybe it was just somebody's idea of a joke, but it's actually true. The first translation of the Communist Manifesto, that was originally written in German, translated into English, opens with the phrase, not a specter is haunting Europe, but a frightful hobgoblin is haunting Europe. The frightful hobgoblin of communism, which I think is utterly hilarious. That's the first translation. A frightful hobgoblin is haunting Europe. But he writes it with passion and energy. And that first paragraph that he writes is about, basically, he's reflecting on his own experience. He's not speaking subjectively, but he's saying every force is being declared communistic. Karl Marx had never heard of communism before. But when he started writing about how unfair the peasants were being treated, they accused him of being a communist. And he said, every force of resistance is being declared communistic. And he begins the manifesto saying it's about time that the communists come together and explain what they believe. And so we're writing the Communist Manifesto. That's how it begins. It's a document born in struggle. People open the Communist Manifesto expecting that they're going to find somebody playing SimCity. You ever play SimCity? That was a fun computer game when I was a kid, right? You get to make a city, and then the city has a hurricane, and you get to draw a road here. And that's not what the Communist Manifesto and Karl Marx was doing. He was not playing SimCity. There were plenty of people back then playing SimCity. Those people were called utopians. Proudhon, he was playing SimCity. Robert Owen, Ferdinand Lassalle, these kind of people, they were playing SimCity. But Karl Marx, he understood that socialism wasn't going to come about by somebody drawing up a magical blueprint and going around and showing it to people. Socialism was going to come about as a result of the struggles of the workers against their employers, struggles of the peasants against the landowners, struggles of society at large to eradicate scarcity and get to a higher mode of production. And Marx called his socialism scientific socialism, as opposed to utopian socialism, because it was about struggle. It was about organizing. And that's why, if you read Marx or Lenin or Stalin or Mao or Enver Hoxha or Che Guevara or any Marxist leader, if you read their writing, not in the context of struggle, it's not going to make any sense to you. You know, if you listen to two professional baseball players talk to each other about how they play the game, if you've never been a professional baseball player, their insights, their observations are not going to make sense to you. If you sit in a room and there's two architects talking about, you know, when I design a building, I do this. Yeah, well, pretty soon you're not going to know what they're talking about. Marx's writing is intended to be read in the context of struggle. And if you are not involved in struggle, you're not building an organization. When you read Marx, it is not going to make sense to you. And that the problem is that a lot of people's introduction to Marxism, including my own, is that they are not involved in struggle. They are feeling somewhat alienated from the society that they live in. And so, you know, they go and they open Marx's writings. And they go, whoa, 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 what is this? It doesn't make any sense to them. Of course it doesn't make any sense to them. Just like, you know, if you had never played hockey, never heard of hockey, never been to a hockey game, and you opened a professional strategy book for hockey players, you wouldn't understand it. Right? If you'd never been in an airplane, never flown in an airplane, didn't know what an airplane was, and somebody handed you a pilot's manual, you wouldn't understand it. Marx is not meant to be read on its own. It is meant to be read in the context of struggle. And honestly, if you're just getting started, I don't think Marx is where you should start. The book that I always recommend people start with is The History of the Three Internationals by William Z. Foster. That is the book I always recommend that people start with. The History of the Three Internationals. It's a great book by William Z. Foster. I've got a copy of it around here somewhere. It's everything you ever needed to know about Marxism, socialism, Lenin. It goes from the time of Karl Marx to World War II, to like the 1950s, the beginning of the Cold War. And it explains it all as if you know nothing. And part of the tradition that I grew up in, I politically matured in, part of what I was taught was that one should always speak assuming that your audience knows nothing. Because if you're in America, if you're in the United States of America and you're talking about communism, your audience does know nothing. And that you should always write and speak as a Marxist in what they call a popular way or a mass way, meaning that your coworkers on the job would hear what you had to say and get something out of it. That your classmates at the university would hear what you say or read what you wrote and they would get something out of it. And you should work hard to be popular in your writing and your speaking. and assume your audience knows nothing and give something to everyone in your writing. Even if you're addressing an obscure historical or philosophical question, it is your obligation to make it relevant to your audience. You have to tie it in with events in the present time. You have to tie it in with things that affect people and their lives. That is your obligation if you were to explain these things. This is our tradition, and this is really, really important. It's really, really important. And I just wanted to get this out of the way because Marx's activism did not end in 1848 by any means. Karl Marx built the International Working Men's Association, which was a international group of labor activists from many different countries. The first international. Karl Marx was a huge supporter of Abraham Lincoln. No, Karl Marx did not just write one letter to Abraham Lincoln. No, Karl Marx did not just mildly support Lincoln. Karl Marx worked for the Republican Party newspaper in New York City. That was the only job he ever had in his life. He briefly worked for a railroad company, and they fired him because his handwriting was too messy. And the only job he held in his life was working for the New York Tribune, the Republican Party newspaper of New York City, owned by Horace Greeley. He wrote, and he was the London correspondent for a pro-Lincoln newspaper. That was his full-time job. That's how he paid his bills. He worked for the Fox News of 1848, the Republican-aligned news outlet of New York City, based in New York City in 1848. Karl Marx worked for Fox News. He worked for the Republican Party, New York City-based newspaper. You can quote me on that. Karl Marx worked for the Fox News of 1848. And Karl Marx wrote glowing articles about Abraham Lincoln. And Karl Marx organized his followers in America to form something called the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment, which was a communist division of the Union Army. It was Germans, German Marxists who'd fled in the 1848 revolution. They'd moved to Ohio. And when the Civil War started, they formed their own wing of the Union Army called the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment. And August Willich, who was a general, brigadier general in the Union Army, he was a German-born immigrant and Marxist, follower of Karl Marx, member of the Communist League, the International Working Men's Association. Joseph Wedemeyer, another very important Civil War military leader, was also a member of the International Working Men's Association, a German immigrant. And throughout the war, Marx was corresponding, writing letters back and forth with these two high-ranking military leaders in the United States. Furthermore, in Britain, one of the main reasons that the British supported the Confederacy was because the textile mills of Britain wanted to get cheap cotton from the U.S. South that was picked by slaves. And so Karl Marx organized the workers of Britain, the textile workers of Britain, that when they would bring a load of cotton from America into their textile plant, they would walk out and say, "We're not working with cotton picked by slaves," because labor in white skin cannot be free when labor in black skin is branded. And Marx organized the workers of Britain to refuse to work with cotton picked by slaves in America. And he organized mass rallies and protests in Britain to support Abraham Lincoln and to oppose people like the British royal family and the British aristocracy and the textile factory owners and the London Stock Exchange monopolists who were supporting the Confederacy. Go and read that letter that Marx wrote back in 1848. Go and read the letter that he wrote to the workers of America, to the Abraham Lincoln. Go read his letter to Abraham Lincoln. I will read to you what he said in his letter to Abraham Lincoln. This is what Marx wrote. We congratulate the American people upon your re-election by a large majority. If resistance to the slave power was the reserved watchword for your first election, the triumphant war cry of your re-election is death to slavery. While the working men, the true political power of the North, allowed slavery to defile their own republic, while before the black man mastered and sold without his concurrence, they boasted it their highest prerogative of the white-skinned laborer to sell himself and choose his own master, they were unable to attain the true freedom of labor or to support their European brethren in the struggle for emancipation. But this barrier to progress has been swept off by the Red Sea of civil war. The working men of Europe feel sure that as the American War of Independence initiated a new era of ascendancy for the middle class, so the American anti-slavery war will do for the working class. They consider it the earnest of the epoch to come that it fell to the lot of Abraham Lincoln, the single-minded son of the working class, to lead his country through the matchless struggle for the rescue of an enchained race and the reconstruction of a social world. That is how Karl Marx addressed Abraham Lincoln. But it gets better. As the workers of Britain were forming labor unions, workers of different countries were organizing and resisting. We know there were a number of developments that happened throughout Europe at the time. One of them was in 1851. In 1851, the French Republic was overthrown, and Louis Bonaparte, Napoleon III, became the military dictator of France. And Louis Bonaparte passed a lot of progressive reforms, built hospitals for poor people, built railroads, was kind of a populist, but he wasn't a socialist. He was a Bonapartist. He was trying to stabilize capitalism. And his popular reforms may have stabilized things for a little bit, but eventually his luck ran out. There was an economic crisis, and pretty soon France was at war with Prussia. The Franco-Prussian War broke out. And France lost. And the capitalist government of France surrendered. But Paris, the capital city of France, had long been associated with progressive movements, the French Revolution, socialist revolts and such. So when the capitalist government of France surrendered to the Prussian invaders, the workers of Paris rose up and seized control of the city and declared a working class government. The labor unions of Paris the socialists and the radicals led by Ferdinand Lassalle and all kinds of different Louis Auguste Blanqui, people like that, and some followers of Marx, rose up and took control of the city. And at first, Marx had opposed it. He said, no, this isn't a good idea. But then once they took control of the city, Marx was blown away by what they achieved. And they declared the Paris Commune of 1871 a working class revolutionary government. It was declared in 1871 in Paris. And that government, Marx said, was the first historical example of the dictatorship of the proletariat. It was a working class revolutionary government. And Marx said they were storming heaven. Storming heaven. That's how he described it. And it only lasted for 8 weeks. And the French capitalists who surrendered teamed up with the Prussians, and they all went in and they crushed the Paris Commune of 1871. And Marx wrote about what had happened in Paris, and he learned from it. And he analyzed it. And he studied it. He wrote a whole book about it called The Civil War in France. He was blown away by what he had witnessed. One of the traditions that comes out of the Paris Commune, I don't know if you've ever seen the fist. You ever see the fist? People salute each other with the fist. That comes from the Paris Commune. Because when the Paris Commune was defeated, the military entered the city and started executing people, lining people up and shooting them. And the way they executed people is they would stand them up and they had a firing squad and they shot them. So some of the communards had the idea that as they were being shot, they would hold their fists like this. So they'd shoot them and they'd have their fists up like this. They'd drop their body in a grave, put some dirt over top of them. And then their executioners would look on in horror because of something called rigorous mortem. When you die, your body starts to stretch out. And so from the ground, the fists would come up from the ground. And the fist rising from the ground, from beneath the grave, the hand of the revolutionary rising up from the soil. That became the symbol of communism and revolution. And from that day forward, the fist became the salute of communists. Communists saluted each other like this as a symbol of revolutionary immortality. So don't tell me Karl Marx was just this intellectual who was sitting up in a room writing about philosophy. You learn that in college, you learn that in high school, you learn that, but it's wrong. That is not who Karl Marx was. And if you don't live a life of struggle, if you're not organizing, you're not part of an organization, and you read Critique of the Goethe Program, and you read The Poverty of Philosophy, and you try to read Wages, Prices, and Profits, or Wage Labor, or what is it, Wage Labor and Capital, or, theories of surplus value, or if you try to read this stuff and you're not involved in a real organization, building a real movement, it's not going to make sense to you. It's going to confuse you. And that is what I want to communicate to all of you tonight. I want to communicate that to you because times are getting serious. Times are getting serious. Things are becoming more intense. The capitalist crisis is intensifying. The danger of a new world war hangs over our heads. The capitalists fight among themselves, trying to move the country toward a low-wage police state. They want to make us poorer, drive down our living standards, make us pay for the crisis that they created, make us pay for the fact that there's not room for us at their assembly lines anymore. They've advanced technology to advance their profits with artificial intelligence, and they have got a highly efficient system of producing products, but they've impoverished the working class and driven the working class away from the assembly line. And so we can't buy back all these products they're producing, and their rate of profit that they make from the products has vastly decreased, and they've got a long-term capitalist crisis on their hands. The problem of overproduction, the problem of the tendency of the falling rate of profit. All of this is coming back with a vengeance. Everyone is realizing now that what Marx wrote about capitalism producing its own gravediggers is becoming an indisputable reality before us in our time. In systems of the past, if people went hungry, it was because there wasn't enough food. But only under capitalism are people hungry because there is too much food. In systems of the past, people were homeless because there wasn't enough housing. But only under capitalism are people homeless because there is too much housing. And we've seen this. Did you live through the 2008 financial crisis? It happened. And thank you, Melissa. I'm glad you like what we do here. It happened in 2008. The housing bubble burst. What does that mean? What is the housing bubble burst? I lived through it. I saw it with my own eyes. I walked through neighborhoods in Detroit that were just full of empty foreclosed homes. There wasn't a house inhabited by a person for blocks. And then just a few blocks from a neighborhood of empty, foreclosed, boarded up houses, I saw families that were living in tents, tent cities erected of newly unemployed workers after the 2008 financial crisis. What happened? What was it? The housing bubble burst because Americans couldn't afford to keep buying homes as they once could, because all of these predatory rip-off loans that they had used to keep Americans buying houses when they couldn't afford to do it anymore weren't working anymore, and all these inflatable mortgages and all of this had come crashing down. And because Americans couldn't afford to keep buying houses, the economy crashed and millions of Americans were homeless. Tent cities were erected. Go out to LA, go out to Los Angeles, go to Skid Row in Los Angeles. You will see blocks and blocks and blocks of homeless people living in tents because there are too many houses. That is capitalism. People homeless because there are too many houses. People hungry because there is too much food. This is a deeply irrational system. A system of production organized for profit, not for social good, where the banks and the factories and the industries are all privately owned. They are privately owned. And those who operate them operate to enrich themselves and not for the benefit of society overall, not for the good of the community. And this is the problem with capitalism. I've told many times, and I repeat myself, but I repeat myself again because it's so important. The coal miner's riddle. Little boy says to his father, "Why is it so cold?" The father says, "Because we can't afford any coal to heat the stove." The little boy says, why can't we afford any coal to heat the stove? The father says, because I lost my job at the coal mine. I got laid off. And the little boy says, Father, why did you lose your job at the coal mine? Why did you get laid off? And the little boy says, because there's too much coal. That is capitalism. The only system where people become poor because too much wealth has been created. The only system where people become hungry because too much food has been produced. This is not rational. And the more efficient they make the system, the more artificial intelligence and labor-saving technology, the more the advance of the computer revolution, the bigger these problems get. The urgency of the moment, necessitated by the computer revolution, is for the economy to be organized to serve public good. The banks and the factories, the major industries, and all the centers of economic power should be made into the property of the people. We need an economy that's organized to serve public good and not profit. We need to abolish profits in command, abolish the anarchy of production, the chaos of the market, and replace it with government of action to control the banks and to control the natural resources, to control the major industries, and force society to march forward. And the goal is a society with so much wealth and so much abundance that people can just kind of take what they need and do what they feel like doing, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his need. The goal is to eliminate scarcity, to create a society where there's so much, where technology has advanced so much that people only work because they feel like it. Labor is no longer a necessity. It's rather something people do to entertain themselves. A society where, because so much wealth exists, all the inequality and social hierarchies fade away. And the need for a government itself can fade away. We have a stateless, classless world of vast abundance by abolishing the irrational capitalist system. That is the message that Karl Marx had. And this is what I would urge you to understand and to give yourself proper context if you're going to read Marx's writings. And that point about Marx being an organizer, Marx being an activist, that point is a point that really needs to be made. Absolutely needs to be made. Because if you don't have that understanding, it doesn't make any sense to you. And as I go over the notes for the various people that are going to be giving classes at our upcoming weekend workshop in Missouri, as I go over those notes, this stands out to me as a really important part of the tradition that I come out of. I was just on with Scott Ritter, and you know, there are times I don't even want to tell people I'm a communist anymore. Because it used to be when I said I was a communist, people didn't know what that meant. They would ask me what it meant. I could tell them. But now if I tell people I'm a communist, they think that means that I'm a teenager with pink or purple or green hair and 3 piercings in my nose and my tongue and my, I don't know, who thinks that the most important thing in the world is being up to date on the latest transgender controversy, and who think all Republicans are Nazis and fascists, And that's not who I am. And those people hate my guts. And they tell me constantly, those people don't like me and I don't like them. But that is not my movement. That is not my tradition. You know, I learned Marxism from an 80-year-old woman named Frances Dostal. Her husband had been a steel worker. She used to say, Caleb, it's the only working class we've got. And she'd gone to young pioneer summer camps in Brooklyn, New York. Her parents were founding members of the Communist Party USA. And she talked about the workers and the bosses. The workers and the bosses. That Marxism that I love. And I'll tell you, I felt at home when I first went to Quito, Ecuador in 2013 for the World Festival of Youth and Students, the annual communist gathering of young people from all over the world. 2013, I'll never forget being in that airport where it was a global gathering of communists sponsored by the World Democratic Youth Federation, a UN organization founded by the Soviet Union. All of us that were there to go to the festival, we were all taken one part of the airport, one corner of the airport. I saw communists from Greece, communists from Venezuela, communists from Angola, communists from Vietnam, communists from China, communists from Sri Lanka and India, every corner of the world. Young communists, T-shirts and newspapers, and we're all gathered in this corner of the airport to wait for the buses that are going to take us to the Bicentennial Park in Quito, Ecuador, where they have the World Festival of Youth and Students, where they were having it that year. I will never forget the moment I was in that airport. Never forget the moment when I was in that airport and people started whispering, the plane from North Korea is arriving. The plane from North Korea is arriving. We were whispering, the plane from North Korea is arriving. I will never forget the moment. The door flew open. And the North Koreans marched into the airport. Everyone was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Silent in the airport. And they marched in. The men were wearing suits and ties. The women were wearing traditional Korean gowns, and they had these military looks on their faces, and they were marching into the airport in perfect formation. The Kim Il-sung youth of North Korea marched in the airport. And the whole airport was silent. But then, one person, I don't know who, started clapping. And then some other people started clapping. And some other people started clapping. And pretty soon that whole airport was cheering for the North Koreans, for the Kim Il-sung youth of North Korea. And this whole airport of hundreds of young communists from every corner of the world is applauding and cheering and giving the fist for the North Koreans. And tears rolled down my face. I thought about all the Koreans who died in the Korean War. All of our comrades who got arrested and beaten up protesting the Vietnam War. all the sacrifices that people have made. And I thought, long live the great unity of the people of the world. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. That was a moment I will never forget. And those were my people. And I went around that festival and I met with communist group after communist group, Cubans and Angolans and Vietnamese and Indians and Chinese and Vietnamese and Sri Lankans and Africans and, and communists from every corner of the planet. Arab communists from Syria, from the Syrian Communist Party, from the Ba'athist Arab Socialist Party. And these people were not pink-haired wokes by any means. They wore suits and ties. And they represented thousands of people. They were members of parliament, elected government officials. They were members of city council. They were the leaders of trade unions that controlled whole industries and regions. These were serious leaders. The communists of India, they control a whole city or whole province called Kerala. The communists of Angola, the MPLA, they're running the government of Angola. They are the government of Angola. The communists of Vietnam, they are the government of Vietnam. The communists of Chile, a huge political party that has a huge history, survived the persecution of Pinochet. The communists of Nicaragua, the Sandinistas, so many different communists. Group after group said to me the same thing. What's wrong with American communists? Why can't you American communists get your shit together? That's what they said. We need you guys to get your shit together. You don't sound like us. You don't preach like us. You don't have a base among the population. You don't have city council and members of parliament elected. You don't run huge organizations. What is wrong with you guys? Why are you guys so weird? What's wrong with you? Why don't you wear suits and ties and look like professionals? Why don't you organize the poor and hungry people of America? Why don't you make clear that you are the inheritors of Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt? I'll never forget, I was a leader of the Russian Young Communist League, of the Komsomol, of the Russian Communist Federation. And I remember he said to me, Stalin, our leader, was great. Roosevelt, your leader, was great. Why don't American communists talk about Roosevelt and how Roosevelt fought for the working class and aligned with the Communist Party? Why don't American communists talk about that? I went to a literature table. I'll never forget this. This was an interesting experience. There was a literature table of a youth group from Argentina. And they had a big poster, a big mural behind their literature table. And it was Juan Perón and Hugo Chavez holding hands. Obviously painted. The two never met, but it was a painting. Holding hands. And I walked up to their literature table and I said, wasn't Juan Perón a fascist? And the young person sitting there said to me, I don't speak Spanish very well. He didn't speak English very well. But no, Juan Perón was the greatest communist who'd ever lived, he told me. Juan Perón was an amazing communist revolutionary. And I thought, really? I'd always heard that Juan Perón was a fascist. And they said, no, Juan Perón was amazing. He was like Fidel Castro. He was like Che Guevara, Juan Perón. I was talking to a different group of people there. But that's my movement. And that's the Marxism I learned from Francis Dostal. And that's the Marxism that defeated Hitler. And that is the Marxism that saved the world from fascism and made Russia an industrial superpower. And that's the Marxism that made China the second largest economy in the world and lifted 800 million people out of poverty. And that's the Marxism that took power in Venezuela and Nicaragua and has built so much, wiping out illiteracy, industrializing. That's the Marxism. A Marxism that believes in growth, not degrowth. A Marxism that believes in comradeship and love and brotherhood, not woke destruction, pessimism, and demolition. A Marxism that believes in class solidarity, not identity politics. A Marxism that says Jesus Christ was the greatest socialist and the greatest communist to have ever lived, and that the fight between Christianity and Marxism is over. A Marxism in Nicaragua that's slogan is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. A Marxism in Russia whose leader is Gennady Zyuganov, a proud Russian Orthodox Christian. A Marxism in Syria that says that Islam is part of the Arab spirit and that the Arab people have built a beautiful religion called Islam, and that is part of their heritage. And as Marxists, they are proud to stand with the Palestinians, and they are proud to embrace Islam. A Marxism that says that they are there to fight for working families. They want people to get married. They want people to have children. They want people to be fruitful and multiply and build the country and build a strong republic. A Marxism that says the goal is not to make everyone poorer. The goal is to raise all of society up. That is my Marxism. That is my Marxism. A Marxism that doesn't say, do your own thing, man. But a Marxism, I saw it in Bicentennial Park in Quito, Ecuador. Every morning that festival started with hundreds of young people that would gather in their uniforms for the Bolivarian youth, the youth supporting President Rafael Correa. And in formation, they would all exercise and do their karate moves and jumping jacks and push-ups, and they're exercising in military style formation, becoming one cohesive unit to fight the imperialists. That's the Marxism I believe in. That is the movement that I am a member of. A couple of years later, I went to Venezuela. And when I was in Venezuela, I met a young woman who hadn't even spoken Spanish as a child. She'd been a homeless child. Her mother had abandoned her or died or something. She'd been a homeless child on the streets of Caracas who didn't speak Spanish. She only spoke an indigenous language. And she'd been adopted by a Marxist priest. A liberation theology priest had adopted her into his orphanage as a child. She said, I believe God brought me to this earth for the purpose. I am going to die for communism. I am going to die for Hugo Chavez. This young woman, she was wearing her khaki pants, and she definitely knew her way around an AK-47. And there's no way in hell the anti-communists, the right-wing neoliberal factions ever coming back to power in Venezuela. She's got Maduro's back. That is who I met in central Caracas. I went to Iran. And I saw children's books about Rachel Corrie, the American activist from Oregon who died at the hands of the Israelis. And I saw murals about Malcolm X, the heroic black freedom fighter who had converted to Islam. I met Yemenis who told me about how they were fighting Saudi Arabia with the fourth largest military budget in the world, but they were fighting and dying to build a new Yemen, to raise their people up with their logo that has a shaft of wheat on it, standing for economic development, and how they're asked, are they agents of Iran? And they say, no, we admire Iran. We admire the supreme leader, but our interpretation of Islam is different. There are 12er Shias in Iran. We're Zaydi Shias. We only recognize imams up to Zaid, but we study Iran, but we also study Venezuela, and we study Cuba, and we study North Korea, and we study China, and we support the oppressed everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world, we support the oppressed, and we are against the imperialists, and we're fighting for a new society, not capitalism, but Islam. I saw that in Iran. There is a new world emerging. There is a new world emerging. Western capitalism is crashing and burning, but there is a new world rising from the ashes. And this new world is socialist. It's not capitalist, but it's not 20th century socialism. It's not classical ML. This new world is socialism with Chinese characteristics. This new world is Bolivarian socialism in Latin America. This new world is Baathist Arab socialism in the Middle East. It's not capitalism, but Islam in Iran and in other countries aligned with it. It's this new world is Christian. This new world is Russian nationalist. This new world is so many different things, but it is a rejection of the satanic Western system. The system that says human beings have no value. The system that says you should be an atomized, isolated individual. The system that says there is no truth. The system says there is no right and wrong. The system that tells us there's nothing to believe in. Every cause is a scam. Every cause is phony. Every mass movement is a cult. Every leader is a fraud. Every ideology is just totalitarian mind control. Selfishness is the only virtue. Man is nothing but another animal. Human beings are a cancer on Mother Earth. We're overpopulated. We've got to drive down consumption. That satanic system, that banker monopolist ideology, that capitalism in decay, that fascist economics being pushed by the richest of the rich, the ultra monopolies, the Silicon Valley fascists, the Wall Street money sharks, the London Satan, the cabal of Western capitalism in decay, the fake economy of derivative ripoff schemes and fictitious capital. There is a whole new world in revolt against that. And that Western system that glorifies the individual above all else, that Western system that breaks apart and deconstructs, that system is coming to an end. And the new world is breaking out. And it's only a matter of time before the new world sets up shop right here in the continental United States of America. And the reason that they're indicting and trying to throw Chairman O'Malley and the Uhuru movement in jail, and the reason they've launched a huge smear campaign against me and the Center for Political Innovation, just going out of their way to try and destroy us as an organization and cite us against each other and divide us. The reason that they must have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to go after us. Look at the videos that they have made. I mean, they have made videos that are long and expensive that they pump just to try and destroy us. The reason that they're so scared of us, the reason they're so scared of people like Chairman O'Malley, the reason that they're trying to crush our organization, the reason is because they know it is inevitable. The American people are going to join their brothers around the world, their sisters around the world. And they're going to say capitalism is bad for them and it's also bad for us. And they're going to say it's time we got rid of the people who have pumped our communities full of opioids and let the roads crumble. The people who've gotten rid of the good paying jobs but built a huge network of prisons for profit. The people who bribed us, told us we had the American dream, and instead have transitioned us into an American nightmare. It's only a matter of time before the working people of Appalachia, the working people of the South, working people of the Southwest, the working people of the Pacific Northwest, and the working people of the Midwestern heartland, workers of Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Texas and Oklahoma and Missouri and Kansas and Alabama and Mississippi and Oregon and Washington, Utah and Idaho. It's only a matter of time before the working people of America say, God damn it, we're sick and tired of this. And just like they've kicked out the bankers in Nicaragua, just like they kicked out the bankers in Russia and in China, just like they kicked out the bankers in Iran, just like they kicked out the bankers in Cuba, we're going to kick them out right here in America. We're going to kick them right out of this country. We're going to make the oil and the natural gas of this country public property. We're going to make a banking system where money and the flow of money and the flow of credit is done in the strategic interest of the country overall. And we're going to mobilize all these young people stuck in low-wage, short-term, dead-end jobs. We're going to mobilize them to go build new highways and new bridges, build new hospitals and new schools, build new centers of computer research, give them money, funding to start new high-tech cooperatives to make breakthroughs in computer science and artificial intelligence. We're going to mobilize the young people to be optimistic and go and build and organize. We're going to enact an economic bill of rights to make sure that every American has the right to a job, the right to housing, the right to education. And in order to do all of this, in order to make sure that our oil and our gas and our coal and our timber goes to make us wealthier, in order to make sure that we run the banks and the banks operate for the good of society, not the good of private owners, in order to enact an economic bill of rights, in order to mobilize to rebuild the country, in order to do that, we are going to kick Wall Street's ass. We are going to kick Silicon Valley's ass. We are going to beat the shit. We are going to beat the shit out of Mark Zuckerberg. We are going to beat the shit out of Jeff Bezos. We are going to kick the crap. We're going to kick the crap out of Bill Gates. We are going to knock the teeth out of all these ultra monopolist rich motherfuckers who have destroyed this country in order to make themselves rich, who aren't loyal to us. They're loyal to an open international system that impoverishes the world, this country included. We are going to knock them out of power. We are going to build a new America for working families. That is what we are going to do. No, and your woke shit that says we deserve to be poor ain't going to work. And your identity politics to play us against each other, it ain't going to work. And your climate change catastrophism that says, oh, we've all got to be poorer to save the environment, it ain't going to work. We're going to make breakthroughs in fusion energy. We are going to discover higher fuel sources. We're going to get beyond fossil fuels to something even better. We're not going to impoverish ourselves to save the system. We're going to do something utterly amazing. We are going to save humanity. We're not going to eat bugs. We're not going to eat bugs. It's only a matter of time before this politics takes hold and solidifies itself and asserts itself as the future of America. It's only a matter of time before that happens. It's only a matter of time before the American people begin to demand a government of action to fight for working families. But I'm going to end my opening remarks tonight. I see there's a super chat. Economic crisis in Argentina. I'm going to end my opening remarks tonight by reciting the Pledge of Unity of the Center for Political Innovation. Every Saturday meeting, anyone who's a member of the Center for Political Innovation, they know this pledge very well, because we begin every Saturday Zoom meeting with this. We begin our conferences with this pledge. We're going to begin our weekend workshop we do in Missouri. We're going to begin it with this pledge. This is the pledge of the World Democratic Youth Federation, the people who convened that amazing festival that I went to in Ecuador. The World Federation of Democratic Youth, when they were formed in the aftermath of World War II, they wrote this pledge, their statement of principles, what they are all about. And we've adjusted it so that it can fit people of all ages. So it's not simply a youth pledge. It's a pledge for all human beings. And we begin every event that we have as CPI begins with this pledge. So I am going to read you the pledge, written at the end of the Second World War, as communists brought young people of the world together on the basis of anti-fascism, peace, democracy, workers' struggle. We've adopted it and adjusted it as the CPI, Center for Political Innovation Pledge of Unity. We pledge that we shall remember this unity, forged at the end of the Second World War, not only today, not only this week, this year, but always. Until we have built the world that we have dreamed of and fought for, we pledge ourselves to build the unity of the people of the world. All races, all colors, all nationalities, all beliefs, to eliminate all traces of fascism from the earth, to build a deep and sincere international friendship among the people of the world, to keep a just, lasting peace, to eliminate want, frustration, and enforced idleness. We have come to confirm the unity of all people, to salute our comrades who have died, and pledge our word that skillful hands, keen brains, and bold enthusiasm shall never more be wasted in war. That's our pledge. That's our movement. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. It's going to be a great documentary soon coming out. Peter Coffin has made a brilliant, amazing documentary about our conference. You're going to get to meet so many of the great CPI people. Tyler's in it. Jetta's in it. I mean, if I start naming everybody, Elizabeth Young, our president's in it. Timoshenko is in it. Noah is in it. Simon Miller is in it. Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, she's in it. I mean, my God, Peter Coffin's in it. He made it. Gavin is in it. Scott Ritter is in it. Garland Nixon is in it. Dr. Wilmer Leon is in it. It's an amazing film. I'm probably forgetting some people who are in it because there's so many people in it, and it's almost an hour long. Beautiful film. Beautiful, beautiful, amazing film that Peter Coffin has made about the Center for Political Innovation. And it premieres on Saturday. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Go and set a notification right now. You don't want to miss this documentary. The Summit Against Hypocrisy 2023, the documentary. You really don't want to miss this. It is premiering on Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you will see what our group is like when we meet. You're going to see Sam is in it. Bismuth Hertz, he's in it. Who else am I forgetting? Who else? So many people are in it. It's just such an amazing film. Go set your notification. Watch this movie. You are going to love it. It's an hour long. It'll tell you all about the Center for Political Innovation and what we're all about. You're going to see behind the scenes how we put on these great, amazing conferences. You know, it is really going to blow your mind. And I am convinced that many of you will join the Center for Political Innovation afterwards. Many of you are going to become members because people are joining every day. Our membership list just keeps getting longer and longer and longer. And I am convinced that many, many people will join CPI after they see this beautiful, beautiful film. So join the CPI. If you want to become a member, we'd love to have you. There's so much work that must be done. And there's communities of solidarity that must be built. We have a task and we must take it on. So those are my opening remarks for tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And now I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Mark in Utica, New York. Yonatan Mahari in Stockholm, Sweden. Steve and Ann in Georgia. Gribble in Southern Oregon. JT24 in Mississippi. Binghamton, New York. Newfoundland. Riverside, California. Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn. Colin in Greensboro. Jamie in St. Paul. Alex from Brazil. Mark in Boiling, Mission, Texas. Carlos in Anaheim, Southern California. Zephyr out in Eugene, Oregon. Karl in Washington. Nick in Tampa, Florida. Killian in Milwaukee. Remy and Gary, Indiana. Zachary Brunch in Richmond, Virginia. St. David's in Bermuda. Bob Troy in New York. Mariah says, a wicked man puts a bold front, but an upright man gives thought to his ways. Kieran from San Diego is with us. Anthony from Detroit. Western Pennsylvania, Lisa Smith is with us. Jenny Lynn from Cincinnati. Micah in Las Vegas is with us. Micah. Welcome, Micah. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. We got Saviero from Mexico. Welcome, Saviero. We got Noah from Boston. Briggy from Pennsylvania. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. You're very welcome for the based stream. Look, folks, if you are wanting to get involved, Tony in Texas, Kim from Jersey City, if you're wanting to get involved, we are having our next live in-person event, June 23rd to 25th in Missouri. However, this is not a public event. This is a members only event. So you have to join the CPI in order to go. We're having a weekend workshop at an undisclosed location in Missouri. It will only be for members of CPI and invited guests. Chris in Salt Lake City, Long Beach, MJ from California. So if you want to come, you got to join the CPI. And we're planning to do a lot more weekend workshops around the country. As we get going, we're hoping to have an event in Portland, Oregon. That'll be our next public event. But if you want to join the CPI and you want to come to our workshop, by all means do so. We need more members in our organization. We have a lot of work that needs to be done, So there you go. 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 But yeah, that's our situation. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And now, I guess, I have the lovely, I guess when are invites sent out for Zoom meetings? Now I have the opportunity to start answering your super chat questions. So if there's something you would like me to address, I continue taking super chat questions. I continue taking them. On a stream. Someone was trying to call me there. Anyway, I continue taking super chat questions. So now I'm going to start answering questions. If you got something else you want to ask me, by all means, send me a super chat. Super chat question number 1. And you talk about Brittany Griner, who cries so much when she talks about Russia. Look, I'm sure it sucked for Brittany Griner. She was caught with marijuana in Russia. She was arrested, and she was traded back. You know who else things really sucked for? Do you know who she got traded for? Victor Boot. And I interviewed Victor Boot from federal prison. And Victor Boot was in prison a lot longer than Brittany Griner. And Victor Boot did nothing wrong. He's just a Russian guy who runs an arms dealing company. And they made a propaganda film demonizing him, calling him the merchant of death, the arms dealer. And then they abducted him from Thailand. And they tried to pressure him to spread dirt on Vladimir Putin, which he refused to do. And so they held him in jail and he couldn't see his family. It was awful what they did to Victor Boot. And I interviewed him from prison. So yeah, it sucked for Brittany Griner. It sucked. I'm sure she has a lot to cry about. But so does Victor Boot's wife, and so does Victor Boot's kids. So does Victor Boot. And so does Maria Butina. She's got a lot to cry about. Maria Butina, what they did to her, all she did was have a boyfriend in the NRA. And they held her in solitary confinement and, practically conditions of torture. Unbelievable what they did to Maria Butina. And you know who else it sucks for? Mumia Abu-Jamal, who's been in prison for years for a crime that he didn't commit. The bullets don't match his gun. And you know who else it sucks for? Leonard Peltier. Leonard Peltier has been in prison since the 1970s. When even his prosecutor is not prepared to say he really believes he killed those FBI agents. You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for Jamil Al-Amin, the former Black Panther known as H. Rap Brown, who's sitting in federal prison right now. And you know who else it sucks for? You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for the January 6th prisoners who got caught up in an FBI sting. The doors were opened for them. Law enforcement escorted them into the building and enabled them to do something. They thought they had permission to go into the Capitol, and they didn't. And now they're all going to prison for a really long time. Sucks for them. Sucks for them, too. You know who else it sucks for? You know who else it sucks for? Sucks for the Holy Land Five, the leaders of the Holy Land Foundation in Texas, Muslim Americans who did nothing but run soup kitchens in Palestine. And after 9/11, they rounded them all up and threw them in prison. You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for Razmia Oda, a Palestinian American who they threw in prison because they claimed that when she filled out her visa application form, she didn't disclose the proper things. They threw her in jail for it. Razmia Oda. It sucks for her, too. Geez, you know who else it sucks for? You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for the Uhuru movement. 4 American citizens that are now facing 10 years in prison for doing nothing but writing articles about Ukraine, having web conferences about Ukraine, running campaigns to raise issues about the awareness, to raise awareness about the issue of reparations and the Black community and how they've suffered. Sucks for them, too. You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for Gonzalo Lira right now, who's being held by Ukrainian forces just because he blogs and reports from a perspective that goes against the Ukrainian military. Oh, geez. You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for the leaders of the Polish Communist Party that were imprisoned for being communists under their laws that are modeled on, well, anyway, they've got laws they passed in Poland that makes it illegal to be a communist or to be proud of the history. You know, I mean, I could go on. It sucks for Alex Saab, a Venezuelan diplomat who had nothing to do with America. He was flying from Venezuela to Iran. His plane stopped to refuel in Cabo Verde. They grabbed him off the plane, and now he's sitting in jail in Miami just for being a Venezuelan diplomat. Sucks for him, too. You know who else it sucks for? It sucks for the Iranian young man who I met in Iran, right? I met a young Iranian man. He was a young man, teenager, American teenager, and he was in Texas, and he was part of the Muslim Student Association at his college, and an FBI informant set him up, and he ended up going to prison and then ultimately getting deported back to Iran for doing nothing, for doing absolutely nothing, for going to the shooting range with his friends and then having an FBI informant make up some story. And, he lived in America his whole life. His family was from Iran, and he got deported out of the country and was in prison. He was in prison and then deported out of the country, set up by an FBI informant who didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. He just, he was part of the Muslim Student Association, and some informant came in there and said, let's all go to the shooting range. And then afterwards said, and this is how we were practicing our terrorist attack. And it was a bullshit lie. And he got convicted and he sat in prison, and then they deported him back to Iran. And he never lived in Iran. He was an American, and he got deported back to Iran. It's complete bullshit what they did to this guy. So, did it suck for Brittany Griner? Absolutely. I'm sure it sucked for her being in Russian prison for having marijuana, being an American basketball player in Russia with American marijuana. But they have done it to so many people. It sucked for the daughter of Huawei when she was changing planes in Canada, and they grabbed her out of the airport, and she got stuck in Canada for 2 years with an ankle bracelet on as they tried to think about deporting her back to the United States for daring do business with Iran, the head of Huawei Technologies. I could keep going. There are so many people that the U.S. officials have grabbed and tortured and held in solitary confinement. So many people. Alex, he has the right answer here. It sucked for Kamala Harris, all the people that Kamala Harris threw in prison for smoking marijuana, and then she laughed about it. She laughed about it, about how she smokes weed also. Oh, half my family's from Jamaica. Of course I smoke weed. Sucks for them. It sucks for the black man who is facing the death penalty, and she blocked the DNA evidence, trying to execute him, trying to prevent DNA evidence from being put forward. Sucks. Absolutely sucks sucks for them also. It's, when things get ugly, people start getting hurt. And when you got an enemy like the U.S. imperialists, who will do so many evil things to so many people, kidnap Maria Butina and hold her in solitary confinement, indict the Uhuru movement just for being black revolutionary activists, torture Victor Boot for years. When you got an enemy that's that evil, sometimes countries have to play hardball. Now, I'm not saying that's what necessarily happened. I don't know the details of what Brittany was doing. I don't know. But sometimes countries have to play hardball when they're up against that level of evil. If you look at what this government has done to Mumia, if you look at what this government has done to Leonard Peltier, you look at what this government has done to so many Muslim Americans who've been framed up and imprisoned. This government, kidnaps people and tortures people. Look at what they do in Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, under such circumstances, maybe Russia felt they had to play hardball. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. I don't know the details of the case. I'm sorry she suffered. I don't want anyone to suffer. I'd like to see all prisons gotten rid of. I'd like to see all death penalty cases abolished. I'd like to see the death penalty completely abolished. I'd like to see a society where people are treated with dignity and we don't need to terrorize people and such. But, history isn't made by people's wishes. History is made by real material forces. Right now, the U.S. imperialists, the ultra monopolies that dominate American capitalism, they realize the world is slipping out of their fingers. So they are tightening their grip and trying to set up fascism, a low-wage police state here in America. So that's my reaction to your question there. Someone said it was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a totalitarian. I haven't studied his writings well enough. I believe, didn't he write about the noble savage? He's a French intellectual who predates the revolution. He was kind of a thinker in France who was respected in the lead up to the revolution. Right? He wrote about the noble savage. I don't remember what else about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. But yeah, he was an important French intellectual of the Enlightenment period. You started reading Dostoevsky's Demons yet, and do you like it? I have not started reading it yet, so I can't comment on it. The synthetic left and the imperialist pyramid theory of the Greek Communist Party. Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, who we flew in to our conference in Washington, D.C., she ripped to shreds. She gave a 2.5-hour speech about anti-imperialism and Marxism-Leninism, and she ripped to shreds that theory, that imperialist pyramid theory bullshit that is being put forward by the Greek Communist Party to justify their neutrality in an imperialist war. So rather than try to give you my own version of that, because I haven't studied those theories with the amount of depth that Jyoti has, I will just link you Jyoti's amazing 2.5-hour speech in the chat right now. There you go. All right. This is Jyoti's speech that she gave at our conference this is Jyoti's speech that she gave, I believe, right? Yeah, this is Jyoti's speech. I want to make sure I linked you the right thing there. This is Jyoti's speech that she gave at our summit in Washington, D.C. Jyoti is a brilliant anti-imperialist. I've always admired Jyoti from afar. I loved her speeches, loved her writings. But having spent time with her in D.C., hung out with her, gone out to dinner with her, walked among the cherry blossoms, she and Elizabeth Young and I got to really get to know each other. Jyoti is the cream of the crop. She is a based, revolutionary anti-imperialist. And Garland has had her on his show. Garland's audience loves Jyoti Brar. Jyoti Brar is utterly amazing. And, go and listen to Jyoti's speech. Where she rips to shreds the Greek theory of the imperialist pyramid. Our family is from Ukraine. I support Donbass. He doesn't. What advice do you have? Well, I think the argument that needs to be made. Today, I was thinking about Taiwan. Today, it was revealed. I don't know if you know this. In Taiwan, they've got this huge huge superconductor computer chip facility. They've got it. Big computer chip manufacturing facility. And it's just started, there's talk among Americans that if China moves into Taiwan, the American government will bomb and destroy the TSMC semiconductor facility. And I saw that. I said, at this point, forget the Taiwan issue. Forget about Taiwan sovereignty, forget about all that. At this point, just ask yourself, if you had a friend who was constantly egging you on to get into a fight with someone who's way bigger than you are and way stronger than you are, and they're just constantly saying, hey, I'll hold your coat for you. Go fight that big, strong guy. Let's, and constantly trying to provoke the big, strong guy to have a fight with you. And then you later found out, not only was he trying to get you into a fight with someone who's way bigger and way stronger than you, but he also has a plan that when that fight happens, while the fight's going on, he's going to go to your house and break all your shit. He's going to smash your TV. He's going to smash your laptop. He's going to light your furniture on fire. He's going to smash all your personal belongings just to make sure that after that big, strong guy kicks your ass, that guy can't take any of your stuff. And you're going to have to ask yourself, is that your friend? Is that your friend in that situation? Is that how friends treat people? They try to get them into fights with people that are way bigger than them. And when the fights break out, they break all of your shit just to make sure the other guy doesn't get it. How much of a friend is America to Taiwan? I think the question answers itself. But that's what we're doing to Ukraine right now. Forget about Donbass. Forget about all of that. Just say to this guy, look, Russia's way bigger than Ukraine. The USA doing everything it can, did everything it could to provoke a confrontation with Russia. And now it won't let Ukraine negotiate and end the conflict. It's insisting that the conflict keep going on. You're getting screwed, buddy. That's what I would say to your relative. I'd say, look, forget about Donbass, forget about Russia and Ukraine, forget all that. Just ask yourself, is America helping Ukraine right now? No. Is Ukraine benefiting from what the Americans have done in Ukraine since 2014? Ukraine is just doing great these days, isn't it? Teaming up with America to fight Russia has just made Ukraine super duper, hasn't it? Ukraine is just amazing these days. Look at Ukraine right now. This is what teaming up with the United States gets you. The United States is happy to provoke a confrontation with Russia, happy to get your people killed, to get your people shot, to have depleted uranium bullets fired to ruin your crops and cause your people to have birth defects and breathing problems and all of that. It's pretty damn obvious at this point. America doesn't give a flying fuck about Ukraine. The USA hates Russia. And they don't give a fuck about Ukraine. Now, this guy, he's got a bug up his butt about Donbass belongs to us, Crimea belongs to us. You're not going to win that argument with him. But just say, look, how was Ukraine doing in 2013? How's Ukraine doing now? Did this have to happen? Couldn't we have just fulfilled the Minsk Accords and let Donbass come back into Ukraine, but respect their language and stuff? Listen, buddy, you can be an ultra-nationalist or whatever, but it's like if you're an ultra-nationalist, that means you're supposed to love your people. If you love your people, you don't want them to get killed so that America can hurt one of its enemies. And what Ukraine has been goaded into doing, what Ukraine has been shoved against its will into doing for the United States, has gotten thousands of Ukrainians killed. It's now got depleted uranium in the air. It's going to ruin their crops. It's ruining their Ukrainians are fleeing like refugees. Is this really good for Ukraine? Forget all the other stuff. Forget the Russia, the conflict, the World War II, the Bandera, and forget all of that, right? You're not going to win that argument with this guy. Just say to him, look, you are a Ukrainian nationalist, buddy. You love the people of Ukraine. If you love the people of the Ukraine, why don't you want this to end immediately? Because it ain't Americans that are getting shot right now. It's Ukrainians who are getting shot right now. It's your people that are dying. America's paying the bills. It's pumping the country full of guns and weapons and all of that, but it's your Ukrainians, people who look like you, talk like you, people from neighborhoods like yours that are getting their arms and legs shot off. They're getting killed. If you love Ukraine, you would want to bring this to an end. But America won't let you do that. So maybe you ought to turn that Ukrainian nationalism around. Maybe your Ukrainian nationalism shouldn't simply be about hating Russia. Maybe it should be hating the people who manipulate you and use you to fight Russia. Maybe your Ukrainian nationalism should be saying, wow, I got this historical disagreement with Russia or whatever, but America is using my people. America is getting my people killed. America has manipulated my country's politics. America is prolonging an episode of mass death in my country. And while I might have a historical disagreement with Russia, the person I should be mad at right now is America. That's what I would say to your friend. I hope this is helpful, Gleb. I hope this is a helpful insight. That is my advice to you in speaking to your relative. That's how I would frame it with your relative. Argue in terms of results, not causes. All right. Did the CIA kill Hugo Chavez? Heart attack shot. There is a theory that they gave him cancer, right? There is a theory that they have some kind of thing they can prick your skin with and give you cancer, right? And that people noticed that a lot of people got cancer all at once, right? Hugo Chavez, Yasser Arafat, Christina Kirchner. It was weird. A lot of leaders the USA didn't like all of a sudden got cancer at the same time. And there was a lot of speculation. There was also a lot of speculation about I remember the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. He was, not Nebenzia, who's there now. He's a cool guy. I've hung out with Nebenzia before. Awesome dude. I've been to the UN mission. He's great, really friendly. He's got a sense of humor. Nebenzia and I, you can watch our 25-minute chat we had one afternoon. Nebenzia is a great guy. The whole crew at the UN mission of Russia. I mean, they're very good, very dedicated people, great people, and very charming too. They get it. They're good folks. But before Nebenzia, there was Churkin, Vitaly Churkin, who was the Russian ambassador to the UN. And he was very articulate, just like Nebenzia is. He knew, and he had a long history in politics. He'd been involved. He was apparently a Soviet diplomat during the whole 007 plane thing. There was an incident over Flight 007, in the 80s or something. And I remember it was very weird. Donald Trump won the election. Barack Obama was president. Donald Trump won the election. And all of a sudden, the USA was putting crazy sanctions on Russia, blaming Russia for getting Trump elected, Russian interference. Barack Obama, look, I'm Barack Obama. I'm on TV today, and I'm explaining that I'm the president. And one thing about Obama, and this is a very good observation, Obama, when he believed what he was saying, was amazing. Barack Obama was an amazing speaker when he believed what he was saying. But when he was lying, he sucked. And that's how you can tell. It's a very good way of telling whether Barack Obama was telling the truth or lying. When he was good, he would be up there, I will join you as a citizen. Yes, we can. He was amazing when he believed what he was saying. But when they took him in the back room and said, all right, buddy, this is what you're saying. He's like, oh, but this isn't true, guys. Why am I saying this? This is not. They said, just say it. And he would get up there. Whenever you see Obama hemming and hawing and, look, we tortured some folks. Look, he broke the law. And, that Barack Obama, the hemming and hawing, that's when he knew he was lying. And I remember, as Obama's leaving office, as Barack Obama was leaving office, it was Russian, interference. That's why we got to put new sanctions on Russia. That's what we got to do. Yep. I'm Barack Obama. Yeah. He was hemming and hawing. He could barely get a sentence out because he knew what he was saying was all bullshit. It was all bullshit. Okay. But he's up there putting all kinds of sanctions on Russia, blaming Russia for Trump getting elected, which didn't happen. Russia's not responsible for Trump winning the election. Barack Obama was responsible for it by being a shitty failure president. But they were going to use this allegation. Somehow it was a Russian conspiracy, Russian conspiracy. Somehow it was a Russian conspiracy that made Hillary Clinton not go to Wisconsin or Minnesota. It was a Russian conspiracy to make the Democratic Party rig the election against Bernie Sanders. It was all just a big, vast plot. And so he's up there, it's Russia. While he's hemming and hawing, I remember I was working in my office. We got the phone call that Vitaly Churkin was rushed to the hospital with a heart attack. And then Vitaly Churkin was dead. And the timing was goddamn weird. It was very weird. It was very suspicious. And that's all I can say. And that's all you can say about any of this, right? And that's the thing with all of this. The only thing that makes me go, right? Because I don't know what happened. I mean, I guess he just had a heart attack. And it could have just been that he had a heart attack. I mean, who knows? Maybe it was really stressful to be the Russian ambassador to the UN at the time. That's all I know, okay? But the timing, just as Obama's leaving office, just as they're blaming Russia for giving the election to Trump, the very well-loved, articulate UN ambassador of Russia mysteriously gets a heart attack and dies really fast. That was weird. That was really weird. It was very, very weird. And I don't know what happened. And I guess he just had a heart attack. But something similar happened a couple of years before that. I don't know if you remember Jackson, Mississippi. The town of Jackson, Mississippi elected a real socialist to be its mayor. Chokwe Lumumba, who was a leader of the Republic of New Africa. He's like an O'Malley, like a Chairman O'Malley, like a black nationalist socialist, right? He was the leader of the Republic of New Africa, which was a black communist group that wanted to create the Black Belt in the 70s. Chokwe Lumumba got elected as the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. And everyone was like, what the fuck? How did this happen? But a black communist got elected to be the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. And then just a couple months after he got elected, heart attack, died. Also very mysterious. The timing makes you go, But that's all we know, right? I mean, it was a heart. I mean, there's no other, and you got to be careful here. If you start saying, well, this happened or that happened, pretty soon you depart from reality. That's when you lift off and you enter outer space. If you say more than, we start going, well, they killed him and it was the Illuminati and it was actually his brother who was actually an infiltrator, then you lose your mind. That's how you lose your mind. And you don't want to lose your mind. We want to deal in the realm of facts here. All right. We don't want to be QAnon. All right. We don't want to be cuckoo conspiracy. But I look at the death of Vitaly Churkin. I look at the death of Chokwe Lumumba. I look at the death of Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt dies just as World War II is ending, just as U.S. foreign policy is shifting from fighting the Nazis to fighting the Soviets. And Roosevelt didn't want to fight the Soviets. He wanted to maintain the relationship. And he's replaced with Truman, who did want to fight the Soviets. And it's like just as the war is ending. Roosevelt's been the president all through World War II, beloved president that people are all willing to fight for. And then just as World War II's ending, Roosevelt dies. You look at that and you go, huh. But that's all you can do. You can just go, huh. And if you go more than that, if you start drawing a narrative, well, actually, he was killed by his cousin who was secretly a member of the Illuminati. Don't do that. Because that's when you depart from reality. You got to stick to reality. Reality allows you to go, huh. I go, huh, about 9/11. A lot of things about 9/11, I go, huh. New revelations from Gray Zone, especially, have made me go, huh, about 9/11. But I'm not saying I know what happened. I'm just going, huh, right? Keep it to huh. And that's the way you can keep your feet on the ground. You don't want to go crazy. I believe in questioning. I don't believe in blindly supporting mainstream media. But I don't want you to enter La La Land. Right? And that's what they want. Go and read. There was a document that was leaked by WikiLeaks that was written by Cass Sunstein. Cass Sunstein is the husband of former U.S. UN Ambassador Samantha Power. He wrote a book on conspiracy theories, but then he wrote an internal classified document that was leaked by WikiLeaks about conspiracy theories. If you read it, he lays out a theory for how to deal with conspiracy theories. What he says is that the government should fill the internet with conspiracy theories intended to discredit conspiracy theories. And honestly, I've noticed that 2 seconds after anything happens in America, immediately it's declared a false flag. And that they want this light switch effect. They love to make it either or. So what they want is they want you to be like, well, Donald Trump was trying to have a coup on January 6th. And so our great heroic law enforcement are protecting us. And Dr. Fauci did nothing wrong. And the USA is fighting Russia because Putin was just having a bad day and decided to attack Ukraine because he's evil. And China is just evil and is about to attack Taiwan for no reason because China is just evil. And America is spreading democracy and gay rights and trans rights all over the world because we're just a nice country. And mainstream media tells the truth about everything, but all alternative media like RT and media from China and media, and websites like Gray Zone, that's all evil propaganda. You should never believe anything from that. They want us to sound like that, or click and go into La La Land. Reptile people, the Illuminati, the anti-Semitic stuff, and that's they love that. They love this false dichotomy where you're either a true believer and believe whatever they say, or you go crazy. But reality doesn't work that way. Between people that are so out of touch with reality, they believe everything they say, and people that are so out of touch with reality, they believe insane shit that doesn't make any sense, there's a sliding scale. Right? And yeah, it's true that there are people who I cannot stand who just will believe whatever the mainstream media says. There are also people, we all know, that have the opposite problem. And they have lifted off and left the planet Earth and are, in orbit. Okay? We all know that those people exist. All right? And even among them, there is a sliding scale. All right. There's various degrees of out of touch with reality. We don't want to be that. And so what I urge people to do is keep it at say something about the official story of 9/11 doesn't make sense, but we don't know what happened. That you can say. Say it's rather suspicious the way these people died, but I don't know what happened. And keep it at that. Because if you get too far off the ground, and that's the scary thing, right? And that's, they actually talk about this. This actually gets into personal psychology. People that actually become like delusional. I mean, we're talking not about people that believe conspiracy theories they read on the internet, but people who just have a world in their mind, people that become schizophrenic. It starts with what they call cognitive distortions. There might be 2 here and there might be 2 here, but we all know that 2 + 2 = 4. But they start looking and seeing the 2 here and seeing the 2 here and saying, well, that makes 5. Well, 2 + 2 does not make 5. So it starts with that. It starts with them saying, I see 2 here and there's really a 2 there. And they see another 2 over here and it's that really exists. And then they say, and so that makes 5. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. 2 and 2 only makes 4, doesn't make 5. You got to find another 1 if you're going to get 5, okay? If you see a 2 here, you see a 2 here. If there's only 4 so far, you got to have another 1 in order to make 5. But people that start to lose their grip on reality, it starts by going, oh, I see 2 here, I see 2 here, so it might as well just be 5. I mean, we all know it's 5. And that's a very dangerous place. You don't want to be that. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be that. Because it starts with 2 + 2 = 5, and after you get used to doing it, then 2 + 2 = 8, and then 2 + 2 = 40, and then you're out of touch with reality. And people that are literally schizophrenic, it starts that way, right? It starts with them. They say that schizophrenics usually are people that have very, very poor communication skills, right? That's one of they talk about a schizotypical personality. There's somebody who's just very shy, very ineffective at communicating their feelings and emotions, and they become very withdrawn. And social interactions are very stressful for them. And it starts that way. And it's kind of a way to deal with the social stress, deal with a lot of internal feelings, and they start to construct a reality in their mind that is not consistent with the real world. And it's gradual, and it usually builds up over the course of time. But this is the important thing to note. Like, there's neurosis and psychosis, and this is a really important thing because, I remember, I've known people who are depressed. I've known people who are a little bit paranoid. I've known people who've can get hysterical at times, get worked up, have anxiety. I've known all kinds of people, right? Everyone is a little bit neurotic. Neurosis, in the Freudian sense, means that there are patterns in your behavior, patterns in your relationships with other people, patterns in your thinking that you are not aware of, and they cause you to make the same mistake over and over again. That's neurosis. And it's very common. And in fact, I would say every human being is neurotic in some way, even if it's a small, tiny, insignificant way. Every human being is neurotic to some degree. All right. Some people have their shit together way better than others. And some people are really struggling. There's certain types of neurosis, hysteria, paranoia, depression. Those are certain types of neurosis that's more, what do you call it? It shows itself more, but to some degree or other, everyone is neurotic. Okay. However, there's another stage, and that's called psychosis. And psychosis is a completely different thing. When someone becomes psychotic, they are not in touch with reality. And that is a completely different thing. Neurotic people can't notice patterns. And because they can't notice patterns in their behavior, they're depressed, they're paranoid, they're hysterical, they're whatever, right? And that's just, most people to some degree or other struggle with that. But when people become psychotic, they have the opposite problem. Suddenly they see patterns that ain't there. It's not that they don't see patterns. They see patterns everywhere that are not real. And they are not processing information properly. They are in an alternate reality. I had a roommate who became psychotic, and it was heartbreaking. I watched my roommate, and it was one of the saddest things I have ever seen in my life. I genuinely feel sorry for this guy. And he's a good person, one of the nicest people I've ever met. Never would harm a fly, just a gentle, well-meaning person, but very shy, had a lot of social anxiety, and he started taking a lot of hallucinogens. I'm just telling you, okay? Some people take hallucinogens and they're fine, but this guy was taking his magic mushrooms and stuff, and he wasn't leaving his bedroom for days at a time, and he went psychotic. And I watched him go psychotic, and it was heartbreaking. It was a roommate of mine, and he would break down crying. He had all kinds of elaborate conspiracy theories about being related to famous people and, people following him around on the street. And it was tragic. It was really, really sad. And that was a lesson for me, because there's mental illness and there's mental illness. And I had always assumed that people that were crazy were just people that were hysterical, people that were paranoid, people that were depressed. No. Psychosis, that's another thing. There's somebody else in my life, someone I worked with a long time ago, long out of my life. But someone I worked with, she'd always had certain problems, but she became psychotic. She kind of crossed into psychosis. Again, I think in her case, drugs may have been a factor, hallucinogens, and it was terrifying. It was very terrifying to be around them, and it was sad because, she was not pleasant to be around, and she caused a lot of problems for me and other people, but we all knew that wasn't her. We all knew it was done out of, she was not there. She had lost her marbles. And, it is heartbreaking to watch someone become psychotic, right? And the basis of psychosis is they just lose their minds, right? I mean, it's like they are not in touch with reality, and so I just want to make that clear, right? And it's important to think about, right? And people that believe in crazy conspiracy theories are not psychotic usually, right? They usually just read websites that believe that, whatever. I mean, that doesn't make you a crazy psychotic person. People that are psychotic about the world around them. They're seeing things that ain't there. They're hearing voices that ain't there. They feel, they I mean, it's really sad when people become psychotic, and it's heartbreaking, right? And I'm not trying to equate people who believe in unpopular conspiracy theories with psychosis, but I'm telling you it's a similar process, because when people become psychotic, it starts with cognitive distortions. It starts with not, with doing math problems that don't properly add up, by saying there's 2 here and there's 2 here, so we'll just say it's 5, right? That's what it starts with, right? If you see 2 and you see 2, you can say it's 4. And you can say maybe if another one comes along, it'll be 5, but you got to stick to that. And until that other one shows up, you can't say there's 5 there. You got to say there's 4. When people become psychotic, it's a gradual process, and it starts with, well, I see 2 here, I see 2 here, so we'll just assume it's 5. No. Can't do that, right? And that's what you got to watch out for. And sometimes conspiratorial thinking can be like that. They see 2 here, they see 2 here, and it becomes 5 because that fits a pattern, a story they're writing in their head, and that's very dangerous. That's very dangerous. That is my advice to you. You can go, wait a second. You can go, but you don't start writing a narrative about what happened with facts you don't know about. Be very careful. Next question. Got lots of energy tonight, don't I? Economic crisis in Argentina. Is this the latest thing in Argentina? I mean, Argentina, the neoliberalism and the market reforms and the IMF and the war against the Kirchner family, Argentina has had lots of economic problems as a result of the fact that there's a real fight in the Argentine ruling class. There's, the Kirchners and others that want Argentina to be an anti-imperialist country. And then you have, the forces that are puppets of neoliberalism in Argentina. So I assume that what's going on there, I haven't looked into it in detail. I assume it's related to this ongoing struggle. All right, next question. When are invites for Zoom meetings sent out? Usually Friday night. If you're a member of CPI, you get invited to our Zoom meetings Friday night. All right. Friday night or Saturday morning sometimes the invite goes out. All right. Next question. Thoughts on the FBI informant in George Santos' office? George Santos is very sketch. Very sketch. Something's going on there. That whole thing is really odd. Right? The whole thing is really strange. It's just a really strange case. Something's been off about that from the beginning. I think we're going to know. I mean, now he's charged, he's arrested. But, like, how was he able to do what he did and, say all these things that were later debunked? And something's off. Something's off. And we'll find out what's going on with George Santos eventually. But long before he was arrested, something was off. That's all I can say about George Santos. The more you look into it, something's not right there, right? In light of January 6th, in light of Donald Trump, and something's off with the George Santos thing. This is a case of, I don't know what's off. I don't know what's going on there. I can't even speculate, to be honest. I mean, I've heard some theories from people, but they don't sound exactly right. I got no clue what's going on with George Santos. Something's not right on many levels. There is some, I look at the George Santos situation. Where did he come from? How did he say all this stuff that wasn't true? How did no one catch him until after the election? How does he now getting arrested? I look at the whole thing and I'm like, something's going on here. I don't know what, but I have a feeling there's more than meets the eye. And we're going to find out what's really happening eventually. But, something's happening there. I don't know what it is, but something's happening. All right. I am now going to end this stream. It's been a pleasure, folks. Tune in tomorrow night when I talk with Tyler and Lori on the, we'll drop the link one more time. Tomorrow night with Lori and Tyler on the Strange Bedfellows podcast. Tomorrow evening, Ask a Communist. I'll drop the link right now. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Tune in. Oh, thoughts on CPIM. They are under attack from the BJP. There's a fight in the Indian ruling class right now. BJP is more independent and anti-imperialist than the Congress Party, but, the Communist Party of India Marxist is on the opposite side of them in a power struggle in India right now. I support India becoming more independent, aligning with China, aligning with Russia. And I have a very high opinion of the Communist Party of India Marxist. Modi is a Hindu nationalist, history of being very anti-Islamic, not a communist, not a socialist. He's a bourgeois nationalist, but it's good that he's leading India in a more independent direction. That's a good thing. But, there you go. The Communist Party of India Marxist, very good party. They used to be like a Maoist kind of party, and then they became kind of a mainstream communist party, kind of usurped the position of the old Communist Party of India. They run Kerala. They've got ties to Vietnam, ties to China. They're a real communist party. They support Russia. So there are contradictions among different forces. Modi is not a thorough, complete anti-imperialist. Let's be real. I mean, he will do business with the U.S. He's a bourgeois nationalist. If the U.S. makes him a better deal, he'll go with the U.S. If Russia and China make him a better deal, he'll go with them. Sometimes he likes Russia and doesn't like China. So, Modi is there's certainly plenty to criticize about Modi, right? The Hindu nationalism, the anti-Islamic stuff, the pro-Israel positions. He's very pro-Israel. I'm not embracing Modi. It would be ideal if the faction that is part of the Modi movement is friendlier to Russia and China could team up with the Communist Party of India Marxist. That would be great. That's not going to happen because the Communist Party of India Marxist is on one side of Indian politics and the Modi faction is on the other. And so that's not going to happen. I hope that our friends in the Communist Party of India, Marxists, don't face any horrendous persecution. But I also hope that Modi realizes that if he really wants to make India a better country, the future of India is with Russia and China and not with the US. And that as much as he culturally, politically doesn't like the Communist Party of India Marxist, they would be great allies against the US imperialists if that's where he's at. But that's not how Indian politics works. They are on opposite sides. And Modi is from the hard Hindu nationalist right, and the Communist Party of India Marxist is a leftist communist party, and Modi persecuting them makes perfect sense. Okay. Modi is like Erdogan. Modi is, he's like, who else? He's like, who else? He's like Erdogan in Turkey. He's like some other leaders around the world. He's like Lula da Silva in Brazil. He's not fully in the U.S. imperialist camp, but he's not fully in the anti-imperialist camp either. He's a bourgeois nationalist. He represents a layer of the bourgeoisie of India that sometimes think they can get a better deal from anti-imperialism and sometimes think they can get a better deal from the imperialists. And the communists are his enemies and vice versa. There you go. All right, folks. And that is our stream for tonight. Be sure to tune in tomorrow night to the Strange Bedfellows podcast when I join our friends and comrades Lori and Tyler. All right. Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.